Welcome, everyone. We are live with another episode of Level Up Law, where every Tuesday at noon, South Carolina Legal Services levels up your legal knowledge about an area of law that we practice in. I'm Senior Staff Attorney Susan Ingalls, here with our producer, Kenneth Elliott. You are viewing live Kieley Sutton, an Assistant Public Defender and Homeless Court Attorney for the Richland County Public Defender Office here in South Carolina. Kieley will be talking today about homeless court and stopping the punishing of poverty. So I'm really excited to hear about this, Kieley. But before we get started, we do want everyone to know that this is not legal advice in any way. It's just general information for the public. If you do need the help of a lawyer on this or any other kind of subject, call our intake line here at South Carolina Legal Services or apply online. That information is going to be provided at the end of today's presentation. I do want you to scan that QR code that you see on your screen if you'd like to sign up for our newsletter here at South Carolina Legal Services. Also, as a reminder, all of our episodes are posted by our producer, Kenneth Elliott, to the Level Up Law playlist on our YouTube channel. Now, also, Kieley has been kind enough to say that she would answer some general questions if there is time today. So do put any questions that you have for her in the question box. And also, one other reminder, do be sure to check out our social media, like and subscribe, and get all the up-to-date information that we provide here on Level Up Law and all of our other resources here at South Carolina Legal Services. There's websites, social media handles, and all of that will also be provided to you at the end of today's presentation. So let's get started, Kieley. We're ready to go.
All right, thank you guys so much. Just to kind of start, I want to say thank you so much to South Carolina Legal Services for having me. Y'all do excellent work. I would love partnering with you, and I really admire the work that you do. So thank you for having me, and I'm excited to talk about some of these topics. So like Susan said, today we're going to be talking a little bit about how we are seeing poverty punished in our legal system, and then some of the responses that our court systems have had. And then from those court system responses, what the community is doing in a way to push back on that punishment of poverty. So we'll start today with how is poverty criminalized? And I think at this point is our first poll question. I don't know when it pops up, but when it does, feel free to answer it.
There it is.
So that first question should be, have you or anyone you've ever known ever had a traffic ticket? I don't see the poll, so I don't know if there's a way to tell me when it's over.
Kenneth can end the poll for us.
Sure, yep. And to share the results here.
Okay, yes, 88%, and no, 0%, and no, but I know someone who has was 13%.
Okay, so every single person on this webinar then has either interacted with or known someone who's interacted with the criminal legal system, which is a really good kind of frame of reference for how we're going to start with this conversation. And we're going to go right into another poll just to, get everyone participating at the beginning. So our next poll is, what happened with that ticket? Did you pay it and not go to court, or the person you know? Did you do some sort of program or community service and then the ticket was dismissed, or I didn't have to do anything and it got dismissed, or something else?
All right, let's see the results. Okay, I paid it and didn't have to go to court was 63%. That was the highest percentage. I did a program or some community service and the ticket was dismissed, 13%. I didn't do anything and the ticket was dismissed, 0% said that. And then 25% people said something else happened.
All right. So again, great kind of background information for where we're going to start, because poverty, or the inability to pay, or living at or below an income level that allows you to not only survive but to thrive in our community, is punished in various ways, including things like traffic tickets and direct statutes or laws or programs. So for example, this traffic ticket, I remember getting a reckless driving ticket in high school. I was able to pay and bring my grades to court and do some community service, and it was dismissed. Here in South Carolina, that ticket is a $600 ticket. And I think I ended up paying like $300. But even in high school, I was like, oh no, $300 is, tough. I can't go to the movies. I can't go shopping. But for someone where your entire rent is $600, that kind of proportion of payment for things like driving or speeding is a significantly different impact on your day-to-day. And so we see these kinds of impacts on folks' lives through various parts of our criminal legal system. For example, kind of going through the list that's on the screen right now, our pretrial intervention class, or this class where for your first charge you can do this program and your charge will get dismissed, it's $250 just to apply. A traffic education program, for those of you who did some sort of community service or program, here in South Carolina, that is a $280 program, which is often more expensive than the traffic ticket itself. So even being able to participate in these programs or classes or services that the court has set up to kind of avoid a conviction can oftentimes be more expensive than taking that guilty plea or doing the paperwork for court. So that's kind of one of the first ways that we see poverty being punished differently than for individuals who are able to pay that. And then kind of going on the other side of the criminal legal system, expungements and pardon costs. Say you have a conviction and that conviction's eligible for expungement, you have to pay for that to go off of your record. And the difference between two individuals who can pay to get their first shoplifting off of their record and someone who can't pay to get that shoplifting off of their record, that's going to influence your job opportunities. It's going to influence the kinds of schools, the kinds of education opportunities. Sometimes landlords could, if they're deciding between two identical prospective tenants, and one person has a shoplifting and one person doesn't because they got it expunged off of their record, that apartment might go to the person without that record. And so even funding that kind of clean up your record at the other side of the criminal legal system, the ability to do that, or the ability or the inability to do that, is going to influence those opportunities in life. And then kind of where I work at the public defender's office and in homeless court, we have a lot of low-level misdemeanors that are often associated with poverty. For example, urban camping, or sleeping outside, trespassing, again, sleeping on a park bench that you're not supposed to, or sleeping in an abandoned building to get out of the weather. Public disorderly conduct. I have a lot of clients whose mental health symptoms display in a way that is disturbing to the public. That can be punished. Aggressive begging. All of these things, these low-level misdemeanors that are associated with homelessness or in housing instability, run through the criminal legal system. And when that happens, you're facing jail, you're facing removal from society, you're facing these fines and fees, and it then also makes it more difficult to engage in housing or programs that could get you out of poverty. So it's this really unfortunate cycle that we see both here in South Carolina, but all across the country. This next point that I want to talk about are the fines and fees on top of your convictions. So for those of you who have answered that you either got a ticket or know someone who got a ticket, thinking back to what that ticket was, there was probably some amount of tax or court cost that was added to the initial cost of the ticket. And what I did for this particular case was I pulled up the breakdown of the fines and fees for any given ticket. So what we're seeing in this screenshot of the public index, which is a public record, is this person was charged with a public disorderly conduct, and then you can see the breakdown of the fees. And so when we go to this part, I don't know if you can see my mouse, but the breakdown, this fine to the general fund at the very bottom, that $100, that's the actual amount of the ticket. Everything above that, the 12, 25, 25, 95, 50, all of those are the additional fines and fees. I think it's interesting in a public disorderly conduct. I'm not sure why there's a victim surcharge. I don't know who the victim of a public disorderly conduct is. There's also a law enforcement funding surcharge, which I think is also interesting, but probably a topic for a different webinar. And again, you're just seeing how that one instance, that one interaction with law enforcement can really expand and kind of I guess, unravel quickly. And then the final thing that I just kind of want to touch on very briefly, because again, it could be its own webinar, is bonds. So for this public disorderly conduct charge, if this person went to jail, then usually if he gets a personal recognizance bond, they're allowed to leave the jail, just promising to come back. But if they're given a cash or a surety bond, then they have to pay the amount that the court sets in order to get out of jail. And what that looks like for a charge like this public disorderly conduct, is usually what we are seeing is that the court will set that bond at the maximum fine plus the maximum fee. And so for this person, if they went to jail for this public disorderly conduct, their bond would be set at this $257.50, which again, you in your youth or your parents might have been able to pay that. I could probably wrestle that amount of money together right now and bond out, but a lot of folks can't. Or if they could, they might be giving up paying their utilities or their rent or their groceries for the month in order to get out of jail, keep working, make sure their kids get to school. And so those decisions, you know, oh, I'm foregoing lunch for the month to bond out versus I'm not going to pay my rent this month to bond out, are completely different factors when deciding if and how one can get out of jail. So that's just kind of how we are seeing poverty criminalized, at least a couple of different examples here in South Carolina. And now we get to kind of transition into the more fun part of this lecture, which is what are we doing about it? What are the responses? So the first kind of really awesome and exciting thing that we're doing is called homeless courts. And I'm going to be the first to say that I don't love the name homeless courts, because we work with individuals who are experiencing homelessness, who were formerly but are no longer experiencing homelessness, or who are at risk of and have never been homeless a day in their life. For instance, someone who's couch surfing, or someone who's facing eviction but currently housed. And so I think that the term homeless courts is a little bit of a negative connotation, and we do see clients who don't want to participate because of the name. So I'm here to say I recognize that the name is bad. It's outside my hands, but that's what it's called. Who do we work with? We work, again, clients who are currently, formerly, or at risk of experiencing homelessness. And what it is it is a non-punitive court program. So that means that there's no punishment. I like to tell my clients that the only bad thing that can happen in homeless court is nothing. But what we do is we have the power to kind of go back in time, reopen and dismiss some of the convictions, or if you have a pending charge, resolve it in a way that doesn't add fines or fees, or could remove a bench warrant or some kind of warrant that is associated with your housing status, with the goal of trying to remove some of these legal hurdles for folks who have either lived in poverty or are currently living in poverty, so that they can move forward to their maximum success. All of that is a bunch of fancy words to say that we try to kind of go back and undo some of those punishments of poverty that happened in folks' backgrounds or are happening to them now. Where are we doing this? Well, right now there are 6. It's really exciting, but we hope that there are more. The first one in Columbia started in 2014, but others have opened since, including Florence and Myrtle Beach and Charleston and Rock Hill and Spartanburg. And I know that other cities are working on developing them now, and so hopefully we'll see a couple more pop up in the future. But one of the really exciting things and why homeless courts exists is because when we remove or take out the punishment of poverty from either someone's background and history or from what they're experiencing now, it does so much more than waive fines and fees. It does so much more than make someone not have to pay. It removes hurdles to employment. Like I said in that example in housing before, if an employer or a landlord is trying to decide between someone who's has a shoplifting conviction and who doesn't have a shoplifting conviction, they're going to go with the person who doesn't have one. And so we can remove some of those hurdles. We can also help with transportation. If you have all these driving and tickets, like speeding tickets or driving under suspension tickets on your record, we can kind of go back and take those off of your record so that you can get your driver's license back. And I mean, I don't know how many of the folks watching this have tried to ride the Comet, but while it is a great bus system, it takes a long time. My car was totaled recently, and I live 2 miles from the courthouse. And when I looked up how long it would take me to get to the courthouse on the bus system, it was an hour and a half. That just wasn't going to be feasible for me to get to court in time and then get to my office. I wouldn't have been able to go to doctor's appointments or anything like that within a timely manner. And so when we help folks get their driver's license back, it's expanding all of these opportunities for jobs, for healthcare, for education, for housing, and so much more. So we do have another poll that's associated with this slide. If we could pull that one up. The first question is, do you right now have enough money saved to pay 2 months of rent if you were fired today? I know I don't, for those of you who are like, I don't want to share that. I for sure would not be able to pay.
And the answers are yes, no, or no, but I have family that would loan me the money. Yeah.
All right.
All right, here's the results. Yes, I have enough money saved to pay 2 months of rent if I was fired today. 89%. That's great. But no,
Yeah,
there's
congrats.
11% for the no and 0% for folks that have family that would loan them the money.
Yeah, I fortunately do have family that would probably be able to step in, but I know that right now I don't have that much money saved up. So for those of you who said no, and if you were fired today or lost your income today, you know, so many individuals, no matter what your employment is, like I'm an attorney, and yet I am still kind of trying between student loans and, you know, all the other things, still pretty much living paycheck to paycheck. And a lot of that is the reality for a lot of individuals. And so all of the folks in that category could potentially be someone who's at risk of homelessness if they lost their job, if they lost their driver's license to get to their job. And so just kind of understanding that the at risk of homelessness is something that's much more common than we originally thought, or than is typically thought about. The next question is, how do you get to work? And the poll is coming up, but the answers are: I drive, I get a ride from friends or family, I take public transportation, or I walk or ride a bike.
All right, here's the results. How do you get to work? 89% say they drive. 11% say they get a ride from friends or family. 0% take bus or other transportation, public transportation, and 0 walk or ride a bike.
All right, so lots of drivers or carpoolers out there, which is common. Here in Columbia, like I just shared, that the comment is available, and it is great if you are able to take the day getting from place to place. We also will see a lot of those, kind of going back to the last slide, of the charges that are associated specifically with homelessness. That trespassing charge we see very often enforced against folks experiencing homelessness from bus stops or from the bus itself. And you know, I don't work for the comment, and I'm not throwing anyone under the bus, but I imagine that a lot of that, and from my experience working with clients, a lot of that is because my clients were sleeping at a bus stop, or were there when the bus isn't running, or had some sort of episode that interrupted the other passengers. And so even my clients who choose or have to rely on public transportation, you know, are often trespassed. And then those where your driver's license is right there on the line of your, you know, again, choosing between rent and paying your car insurance, or you get into an accident, or you get too many parking tickets, because we all know that those add up, and you lose that ability to drive, you're losing your mobility and your ability to participate in our community. And then we have one more question for this slide. And while it's getting posted, I'll go ahead and read it. And it's, on average, how long does it take you to get to the work or the grocery store or home or doctor's offices, the places that you typically need to go? Are you kind of within that 0 to 15-minute range to everywhere, 15 to 30 minutes, 30 minutes to an hour, or more than an hour? On average, how often are you traveling, or how long do you have to travel to get to where you need to go?
All right. The answers are 56% say 0 to 15 minutes. That's awesome. 33% say 15 to 30 minutes. 11% 30 minutes to an hour. And 0% have to travel more than an hour to those places. So that's great. I guess
Yeah,
it depends on geography and other factors.
that is awesome. And I recognize in myself that I am a perpetually late person. And so when I was looking for where I wanted to live, I knew that it would have to be within 10 to 15 minutes of where I needed to be most of the time, or else I was just never going to make it. But I have that luxury of, if I wanted to, I could live an hour out. If I needed to find housing that isn't the downtown studio apartment prices, I have a driver's license that would allow me to find that affordable housing out in the country and increase my commute time. You know, there's always the payoff of gas versus rent, but if your affordable housing options don't exist in the city limits, or exist but on a very, very small scale, then you're stuck. And if you don't have a way to travel to those affordable housing options, or to the clinics, or to services that might be further outside of the metro area, then you're significantly limited in that community participation and your economic opportunities and your education opportunities. And so in homeless court, when we remove some of these hurdles, we're expanding that ability to participate meaningfully in your community. We're expanding the range that someone can apartment hunt. We're expanding the range that someone can job hunt, which increases their opportunities, which could ultimately lead to a much more stable life that is hopefully not at or below the federal poverty guideline. So that's the goal of homeless courts. That's why we exist. And it's been pretty exciting so far. And I will show you kind of, the next slide talks a little bit about what the Columbia Homeless Court looks like in 2022. Breaking it down, we had around 25 different partner agencies submit referrals. So all of the participants in homeless court are, you know, in that class of experiencing or at risk of homelessness or formerly homeless, but they're also working with a partner agency to engage in social services that will help support them into that more stable lifestyle, into that more stable, like, economic and health and employment opportunities going forward. We had 20 graduates in 2022, and that resulted in, I want to say, around 55 individual tickets or convictions being taken off of folks' records. And so we were able to remove 55 hurdles for 20 people. What does that look like exactly? Well, when we are in homeless court and we can reopen and dismiss a traffic ticket, not only does that get rid of the conviction and waive your court costs and fines, but because it was reopened and dismissed, it also waives the associated suspension fee at the DMV. So if you get a speeding ticket of 10 miles per hour or less, that ticket's $78.87 or something along those lines. And then if you can't pay that, your license is suspended and you have to pay the DMV $100 to get your license reinstated. So your speeding ticket goes from $80 to $180 very quickly. But if you participate in homeless court and we undo that conviction, it goes from 180 to 0 just as quickly. It also allows us, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, I'll talk more about this in future slides, but it allows us to kind of be creative with our state's expungement opportunities. By going back and reopening and dismissing and removing convictions from people's backgrounds, it can make a formerly not expungible charge expungible again. So we're clearing hurdles, helping folks kind of reduce their criminal rap sheet length and history, and expanding that geographic scope of their meaningful community participation.
These are great statistics, Kylie. There is one question, if you don't mind me
Sure.
interrupting for a moment. I know you said you could answer questions. So,
Sure.
So you can go back and change charges that were a conviction, and I'm assuming that's as long as you can prove that it was somehow connected to homelessness, or are there other factors that can be shown?
No, the only time that the homelessness is factored in is whether or not you can be a participant. And so even if the charge or the conviction stemmed from a time when that was not necessarily a concern, the idea of someone being at risk of homelessness, like I said, could mean that you were never experiencing homelessness, but you're at risk of that. And so by removing these legal hurdles, if it's going to prevent that homelessness, then it can be removed, even if at the time that conviction was not associated.
Okay, that's great. Well, great statistics. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for the question. I think that also kind of goes to show when we're working with individuals, the reason that we rely on these agency referrals is because, one, the court is not set up to be rehabilitative, right? The legal system is not something that's going to offer that social services support in order to keep someone kind of forward progressing. And so what we do is we rely on the experts in our community to provide that aspect. So the agencies with the client who's being referred sit down and talk about that individual's goals and that individual's needs and come up with their own case management plan with their own hurdles and their own kind of checkpoints. And so the other really beautiful thing about homeless court is that it is different for every person. One person can be like in and out in 2 months, and someone else might need to be participating for a year, depending on what their goals are. So for instance, if someone's homelessness or legal hurdles stem from a substance dependency disorder, then the goal could be, well, they're going to participate for 6 months in homeless court, and they're going to provide documentation of going to AA and LRADAC, or the Lexington Richland Alcohol and Drug, I don't know if it's council or commission, I always just say LRADAC, but drug counseling, and I'm going to bring that in and check in with the court once a month as a form of accountability. And then when I hit 6 months sober, we're going to celebrate that by going back and reopening and dismissing these convictions as a way to continue that forward progress. And so with that individual case plan, what's really exciting about it is that means that your criminal conviction might not be the only or the most important legal hurdle that we need to remove. And so going to this pie chart and talking about some of the other things that we're able to do, the fully expunged, tickets dismissed is the most common, but also diplomas found. We've had participants where they got their GED in prison, and we were able to go back and get their records and bring and get that proof of GED acquisition from prison. IDs obtained. I know South Carolina Legal Services attorneys and staff are well versed in the ID issue, but if you don't have your ID or your birth certificate or your social security card, it's very difficult to get any one of those. Your birth certificate, you need your ID. Your ID, you need your birth certificate and your social security card. Your social security card, you need your ID and your birth certificate. So if you're missing one to all of those documents, it's very hard to apply for housing or jobs or healthcare or a bank account. And so we will work with our participants to go back and track those documents down, because there are ways for attorneys to request those documents if our client doesn't have them already. And then also, you know, reopening and dismissing specific convictions is not the end. Sometimes if we reopen and dismiss some traffic tickets, we still need to work with our clients to figure out what else is needed to come into compliance in order to get their driver's license back. So that's what that pie chart shows. So those are the kinds of programs that are structured and exist currently. Excuse me. All right, this is the part where we can kind of transition between, okay, we started with here's how poverty is criminalized, and then we talked about here's a court program that exists. And now we're going to talk about kind of more efforts to decriminalize and address the criminalization of poverty, but also talk about kind of like dream world, right? Where can we go? What can we do? How can we use the tools that already exist? So homeless court is one of those things, and it exists. But I think what we're seeing, especially with as courts get rolling, is, you know, they want to stay within the structure, which is absolutely fine. When you're starting with a program, it's completely acceptable and expected to say, here's the parameters, let's be in this and get this down before we kind of get try to like push the boundaries a little bit. But luckily, Columbia has had their homeless court since 2014, and we've been able to evolve and learn and think about ways to expand homeless court and to use homeless court outside of the traditional understanding. So I referenced earlier some of the enhanceable charges. You know, if someone has, you know, 4 or 5 charges within a very short period of time, and 3 of those are things that can get dismissed in homeless court, then if we can only dismiss those 3, they're still left with 2 charges on their record. And that might not be enough. That might not be the thing that really allows someone to keep moving forward. But don't worry, because what it can do is it removes those 3 charges, and then the timeline for what is expungible changes. Because if that conviction for that lower level misdemeanor offense is within 1 year or within 3 years or within 5 years of a first conviction, sometimes that changes whether or not that conviction can be expunged. And so that is one of the ways that we can kind of be creative with it. And since we're able to partner with the solicitor's office, they'll look at it and say, well, we've dismissed these, maybe we can help out on the expungement charges. And I realize now that as I was talking and reading enhanceable and expungement are not the same thing. So I'm sorry, kind of got off on a tangent. But so the expungement issue is separate, and kind of going back now and talking about the enhanceable charges, there are things that are low-level misdemeanors that get stacked up and turn into felonies really quickly. Driving under suspensions, after you get a certain number, that becomes a habitual traffic offender, which is a felony. Some of your property offenses, shoplifting, breach of trust, Lord, what else? Petty larceny, those things that are low-level misdemeanors. Once you get a certain number, that becomes a felony. Simple possession of marijuana, your second one, becomes a felony. And so if we're able to remove some of those convictions from your past, then it takes you out of that kind of danger zone. I will say that homeless courts don't love to include charges that have associated victims, but this is where we start getting creative, where we start getting outside of the box. Excuse me, when I talk too much, I cough. But when you're working with the solicitor's office and you're talking about a property offense from 12 years ago that is expungible, then does the Victim's Bill of Rights really need to say, or what does the Victim's Bill of Rights play a role here? What's that role? If we do notice, do you have to provide notice for expungement? What are the different options? Excuse me. We're living. We've already talked a lot about the expansion of that geographic scope of meaningful civic participation. And again, fancy words for when you remove legal hurdles, you are also removing those geographic hurdles and expanding the area of participation for individuals. One of the other things that we've done that's been kind of outside the box is we provided letters and support for housing or employment for some of our participants. So some individuals want to participate in homeless court to get an eviction off of their record. Well, there's not a way to do that right now under our current law. But what we can do is provide our participants with a letter from the defense attorney, from the prosecutor, and from the judge that says they participated in homeless court, they graduated, they did XYZ, and they were here for this long. They got this eviction at a time where they were experiencing these difficulties, and they have now engaged with these programs and are now a much better suited candidate for housing or employment. And that letter is much more powerful than just coming from the public defender, because while I think that we are awesome, some people will just be like, oh, your defense attorney has to write that. But when we include the judge or when we include the prosecutor, it is coming from a team, it's coming from the court system, which is much more impactful. And then finally, getting outside of the box in homeless court means that we are celebrating individuals who have gone through a legal system that has previously only punished them, and has previously only seen them at their worst, that has previously only talked about their failures. In a homeless court, what we do is we celebrate their progress, we celebrate their journeys. Some of our participants have never graduated anything. They didn't graduate high school, they didn't graduate any kind of programming, but here they are graduating. And so as you can see in this picture, they get a certificate of completion signed by the judge, signed by the defense attorney, signed by the solicitor's office, because what we are doing is creating a space in the legal system that is celebratory and non-punitive, which even that in and of itself is a success, because that's not everyone's typical experience, or even I think anywhere else's experience in the criminal legal system. All right, here's questions. And this is if you have any questions about homelessness, or I'm sorry, homeless court, or what we talked about so far.
Here's one. Is the court, is it with a magistrate or is it in circuit court? Or both?
That's a great question. Every court is structured a little differently. So Columbia's is based out of the municipal court and only has jurisdiction over municipal City of Columbia charges. Other jurisdictions will start with the magistrate, because the county typically also has jurisdiction over the city level offenses, which gives them much more jurisdiction and power over what they can and cannot dismiss. Going back to one of like the creative things and pushing the box things that I talked about, Columbia has been really great, and the solicitor's office has been really great at just trying to see if we can communicate to the county and see if they're willing to consider our consent orders, and they have so far. So even though we technically only have jurisdiction over Columbia, sometimes we're also able to work with county charges. And then the other beautiful thing about more and more homeless courts kind of popping up is that if you participate in the Columbia homeless court, but you had charges coming out of Florence, I might be able to then communicate with the homeless court in Florence and say, hey, they did this program. Would you consider dismissing the charges up there, because we have that equivalent court? And so it's really only summary level or the 30-day misdemeanor level, and they don't include DUIs or domestic violence charges. And then also like I said, the victim associated charges are case by case, but that is kind of the jurisdiction specific of each homeless court. I will say, sorry, one of the things that we can kind of think about in this outside of the box way of using homeless court is you might have a nonviolent offense in the circuit court that is not homeless court eligible, but it's pending. And what we can do is have you participate in homeless court, because like I said, nothing bad happens there. And so if you're participating and checking in as kind of like a preemptive probation or a preemptive kind of outside the box resolution to your criminal charge, you know, we did this much community service in homeless court, or we went to this many counseling classes, you can still bring that to your circuit court case and say, we did this, and use that either to negotiate a sentence or maybe even show that you would be successful on probation or something like that. So while circuit court level charges are not eligible for homeless court, there's nothing to say that we can't use it for kind of mitigating or addressing the plea negotiations in circuit court.
That's great. You know, I love that that this homeless court idea is, as you said, it's changing that narrative about the court system from something that's negative to something that's positive, and that's a great thing. So, love it. I don't see any more questions for now. So.
All right, well then we will keep moving. Thriving outside of the box, and there is a poll question here if we want to put that up. This question is, are you aware of any no barrier legal clinics in your area? Either yes or no. I don't know if the poll is over, but
22% said yes, I'm aware of a no barrier legal clinic in my area, and 78% said no, not aware of any no barrier legal clinics in their area.
Yeah, that does not shock me at all. One, they're really difficult to provide, right? Because I think attorneys, one, we're scared of that kind of liability at just kind of a walk up and ask me questions kind of thing. The timing is difficult. The participation, the agreement from multiple agencies is difficult. But when we use a homeless court model and we start thinking outside of the box and kind of pushing towards these ideas and working with other agencies, things can happen. And so the three things that are on this slide are just examples of some of the outside of the box programs that we've been able to put on. Ask an Attorney Day is very similar to Project Help, which I love and admire from South Carolina Legal Services. So Project Help, you know, I'm not sure which of you are working with South Carolina Legal Services, so I'll just talk about it. Project Help is kind of like a walk-up basic legal questions with referrals to South Carolina Legal Services or kind of ideas on what your next steps need to be that takes place in Transition's homeless shelter. So it's bringing that kind of question desk essentially to folks who are living in shelters. And Ask an Attorney Day is very much modeled in the same way, but it takes place at the library because a lot of folks might be banned or can't get into Transitions. And so we just kind of chose another location. And if you zoom in, you'll see kind of all the different areas of laws that we've covered. And it's not just criminal, it's wills and estates and property and expungement and family court and all this kind of stuff. And so we get volunteers who can come in and answer this. But we also, because we have stakeholders who work through the homeless court and know about homeless court, they're a little bit more willing to kind of work with us. So, you know, we had someone come in for an expungement issue where they had a charge on their record from like 89. And the police department and the court where it was prosecuted didn't have any record of the resolution, but because of our relationship through homeless court, we were able to find a way to get that expunged anyway without the documentation of what happened. And so that person came in to ask an attorney day, but through the partnerships with Project Help and homeless court and all these other things, we're able to come up with a collaborative answer. This middle picture is a picture from the City of Columbia Amnesty Day program that happened in 2021. The court was able to waive kind of fees for individuals who had fees that were old and resulted in a bench warrant. And what we did here is we pulled in volunteers from our partner agencies at homeless court who were there to screen them for services, to screen and answer questions about counseling opportunities or job opportunities. And so you can see my beautiful face, you know, providing the legal advice, but we had so many other really great partners who are there to offer the social services in conjunction with that legal advice. And so those partnerships and those kinds of clinics can come out of homeless court. And then the third picture is of the bench warrant kind of removal clinic that happened with the solicitor's office, where they were saying that anyone who can come in will have their bench warrant waived. And again, we brought in our service provider partners who were there to help facilitate screening of services. The other thing that's kind of popped up out of this intersection of the legal and social services need that's associated with poverty is the Rainy Day Fund. And so I am really honored to be the executive director and one of the founders of the Rainy Day Fund. But what we are is we are a nonprofit that works to eliminate some of these financial barriers that are preventing individuals from moving forward. So I'm sure, and I actually think that there's a poll question about this, so let's do that. And as it gets put up, the poll question is, have you, a loved one, or a client ever had a legal problem that could have just gone away if they had enough money? Answer is yes, and I found someone who could help pay that, or yes, and I had no idea where to find the funding, or no, that's literally never happened or occurred anywhere near me.
Well, as we're waiting for the poll results, I have to say I'm a big fan of the Rainy Day Fund. So kudos to you and the folks there for what such a great idea to help folks out.
Thank you. We are having a good time with it.
Here's the results. 57% said yes, but I had no idea where to look for the funds. 14% said yes, and I found an agency that had the money to help. And then we've got 29% who have not experienced that. So
that's I'm surprised by that last number, because I cannot tell you, even that those who paid the traffic ticket and it went away, you know, that is an example of kind of being able to fund something and not have to show up to court. Even that like experience of having a bench trial or having a judge tell you that you're a terrible driver, avoiding that with that fine payment is, I think, an example of what kind of paying a legal hurdle could be. But
you can miss court or not have transportation to court, and it helps that way. Yeah.
Those PTI program costs, the expungement program costs, all of that. I've just had so many clients where it was frustrating because they are PTI eligible but don't have the $250, or you know, they could reinstate their license but they owe the DMV $300. Those kinds of things that everything else is in place, but there's just some sort of fee, or they get a housing voucher but it doesn't cover the security deposit or the move-in costs, or I got into rehab but I don't have money for the bus ticket. All of those kinds of things that could help someone move forward or help someone either exit or avoid further legal system entanglement is the goal of the rainy day fund. That's what we want to pay for. And so it is a nonprofit. It's run by all volunteers, an all women volunteer team. And what we do is, because we're volunteers, we take most of the money that we that comes in and put it right back in the community. I think the last time I checked, our operating budget was below 5%. Everything else we're trying to just put right back into the community. So we get requests for things like I said, moving costs, or, you know, I need to go, my medication was lost or stolen and I need a new refill, but it's $45 because it's not covered by insurance. Or I was court mandated to do counseling, but I can't afford it. And so I don't want to be violated. We had the opportunity to pay someone who is on administrative probation. So he had successfully finished probation, but he still owed kind of the administrative costs. And so if you're on administrative probation, you're still kind of supervised. You're still entangled with probation, and you can't apply for things like a pardon or try to get your civil rights reinstated until you've paid everything off. And so we were able to pay the remaining couple $100s and get him completely out of probation. And those are the kinds of things that we pay for. And that's some more out of the box thinking that arose from homeless court and this kind of partnership collaboration. I don't know how many of you guys have had clients where you're just like, oh, I can pay the $20 for the bus ticket, or I can, you know, I'll take you to lunch. That adds up when you're on a public interest salary. And so we needed to find a way to step in, and it's very, we try to be as transparent as possible. So these are our 2022 accomplishments, and 2022 was the first year we were actually in, full year we were in operation. And so in 2022, we helped 100 people. We spent $21,705. And this isn't everything that we paid for, but it was kind of the bigger numbers. Hotels, gap housing is a big one. If you're in jail for 90 days, you're no longer considered homeless, fun fact. The federal definition means that the jail is your home now. And so you can't go directly into a shelter or somewhere that takes federal funding because you no longer meet that definition. And so we'll do what's called a gap night in a hotel, because if you're in a hotel, you are considered homeless because that's not your house. It's not your home. You've only been there one night. And so we can help facilitate someone from jail to a hotel to a shelter and make sure that the continuity of care stays intact. We helped with housing costs. We help provide birth certificates, helping pay. We have clients who are offered all the time, pay this much money in restitution, and it'll get, your felony will get dismissed, or, you know, pay this much money or we'll enhance it. And so we try to make that not something that needs to be a factor in the legal system. The pay or else is not the world that the Rainy Day Fund wants to exist in.
Did you say that the Rainy Day Fund is it just operating in Richland County right now, or others?
So we're based out of Columbia, but we take referrals from anywhere. We can help as long as it's similar to homeless courts. It has to be a partner agency that does a referral, and we can take them from anywhere. It's just whether or not we have the money. We're working right now on getting our Virginia business license, because we have a couple board members based in Virginia. And so we get a number of referrals from there, but we are not limited to Richland. We might have grants that are limited geographically, but the Rainy Day Fund as a whole is not.
That's great.
I'm going to go quickly through these photos because I love them. This man waving to us in a car, he was stopped for expired tags. He owed, I think it was like $37 in property taxes, and so they suspended his tags, but he was living in his car. So the police officer actually decided to tow the car rather than just let him go pay the taxes. And so his home now cost $400 in towing fees plus $50 a day. So it ended up being close to $600, and it was just going to grow if he never went and got his car. So we were able to pay the towing costs, and he got both his transportation and his home back. The gentleman showing his driver's license in front of congrats. There were a bunch of administrative errors that suspended his license, and he owed over $8,000 in reinstatement fees. We were able to refer him to homeless court. Homeless court kind of went back and undid a lot of those convictions and reduced it to $800. He was able to pay $400 of that, and Rainy Day Fund was able to step in with the rest. And he hadn't had a license in, I want to say it was close to 20 years. And he drove us all to get ice cream after getting his driver's license back. And it was a really beautiful, just kind of, he had been walking to work for so long, and he was able to drive and get promoted to a driving position within his employment. This gentleman in the wheelchair is Rainy Day Fund's first client. He was living on the streets, but he didn't have a mental health issue or a substance dependency issue, which means that he didn't qualify for a lot of the emergency housing programs. We were able to pay get a safety deposit to get him into a group home, and he went from being hospitalized almost every other day for some kind of physical ailment to, I think it was a couple months before he had to go back for just a routine checkup. And so that's the kind of difference. And then this gentleman in the middle, his first baby was due and his license was suspended, and he wanted to get his license back so that he could drive his baby from the hospital. We were able to get his license back a week before that baby was born, and he was able to drive everyone home. And as you can see from his face, he is thrilled. So that's some of the work that we do. And that's kind of the end of my presentation. I know we're right up against an hour with my contact information and any questions, but I think the main takeaway is that poverty is punished, and it is something that's very prevalent here, both in South Carolina, but in the United States in general. But there are programs and efforts and outside of the box thinking that is going to combat that. And I say that not because I think that that's enough. Like, I think in our future, the goal is that poverty is not punished at all. We're not just trying to offset it. We're trying to eliminate the punishment of poverty. But until that happens, collaboration and working together and coming up with these ideas and just trying them is a way to push back on that system. And I love being a part of that through Homeless Court and Rainy Day Fund. And I appreciate South Carolina Legal Services because y'all are a partner in both Homeless Court and the Rainy Day Fund. And I am truly grateful for that partnership. And so that kind of wraps it up for me.
Thank you so much, Kieley, and those are really kind words from you. I want to thank you for a really excellent presentation and congratulate you on the work that you do and those who work with you. I think it's really terrific. You know, the information you've given us today, it's important. It demonstrates that there is a really wide-ranging impact that homelessness has. So thank you for that. And we also want to thank you, our audience, for joining us here today and each week or later on the replay on YouTube channel. And you see on your screen here a QR code where you can just go ahead and scan that and let us know if there's something that you'd like to talk about or have us talk about on Level Up Law. If there's some legal issue or program that you'd like to hear about, we want to hear from you. So definitely go ahead and do that. And as we're moving to the final slide, I want to say if you did find this presentation today helpful, and I'm sure you did, and you know it'll be helpful to others, please do go to our YouTube channel at South Carolina Legal Services and share this broadcast. We want as many people as possible always to get this kind of important information. And while you're there, be sure to like and subscribe for more. If you sign up for the notifications while you're there, you'll know every week when we post a new episode or when we post other resources from South Carolina Legal Services. We're about to hit 2,000 subscribers on YouTube, so please go there and help us reach that next big number. And be sure to tune in next week for another episode of Level Up Law on Tuesday at noon. Our presenter will be Roger Acton of South Carolina Victims Assistance Network, or SCVAN. And great segue from what you've been talking about today, Kieley. Roger is going to be talking about the impact of collaboration. SCVAN is also one of the great partners that SCLS has here in South Carolina. So we're looking forward to that discussion with Roger about all the different ways that organizations in South Carolina are making things happen, just like Homeless Court and the Rainy Day Fund. So also here's how to connect with us. Be sure and scan that QR code again if you missed it and want to sign up for our newsletter. We really appreciate everybody tuning in today. Be sure and contact South Carolina Legal Services if you have a legal matter that you would like assistance with. Well, listen, Kieley, thanks again for a great presentation today. We really appreciate what y'all do. And thanks again to our audience for tuning in today on Level Up Law. That concludes today's webinar. Thanks, everybody.
Thank y'all so much.